Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our collections session. If you can hear me, can someone kind of raise their hand on the little panel so I can make sure? Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. There's still a few more people that have signed up that haven't joined yet, so I'll give them another minute or so, and then we'll start walking through our session. Okay, I haven't seen anybody adding a few seconds here, so I'm going to go ahead and begin our session. This session is around the accounts receivable collections section. It is not to go through all of, cash posting and things like that. It is to focus on the collections components that we have within Autopart and some of the tools we have that some people use, some people don't use. So what we're going to be talking about over the session today, as well as next week, same time, same place, we're going to talk about what we call the collections lists. It allows for tracking of customer activities, and the nice thing is we're tracking that electronically, so hopefully that can improve some internal communication for you guys. So there's more visibility than handwritten notes and things like that that are fairly typical. It gives a little bit of customer relationship management components. I'm going to touch a little bit about that as we're going forward. But our main functions are what we're going to call the collection call management, our credit notes, as well as customer letters and tracking those, as well as doing those collection activity notes and logging those inside Autopart. The session is going to flow similar to the way the previous ones have gone. That for those of you that have attended those, we're going to start with the basics. The members that have joined, there are some people that are still in the implementation process, and there are some people that have been live on Autopart for quite some time. So my idea here is we're going to start with some of the basics, some of the original setups and things like that, go through some typical collection type activities, then flow into the electronic control maintenances and how those can be utilized and things like that. There are some obviously parameters behind the scenes. So some of the screens that I bring up, you may not have, may not have on your system, but those can be turned on, added to your menus and things like that. But that's how we'll go through. As with the other sessions, when everyone is on mute, but when you have questions and things like that, in the little webinar control panel, there's a place where you can enter your questions. And what that'll do is provide me with a spreadsheet of everyone's questions. When I complete the session next week, all of the questions that have come in during this session as well as next session, I'll put together a document with all of those questions, who asked the question and the answers for those, and share that with everyone who's attended. So, everyone can have the benefit of the question and answer piece. So what I'm going to do, we're not going to PowerPoint, the world here. I do have a PowerPoint that I will send out with this that has screenshots that you can use for reference and things like that. Maybe just a reminder of some of the things that we've talked about during these 2 sessions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump into the Autopart ledger side. And again, we're going to start from the basics and work forward. Hopefully it'll build a nice story as we're walking through these functions. So obviously, as we're talking about collections, we're dealing with your customers and your customers that are holding accounts receivable balances, and how you're going to get money, right? No one's doing this just for favors. Inside the customer record itself, I'm not going to go through all of the elements on here. I'm just going to kind of hit some of the things that are related to the collections processes. So inside the customer record, we do have different categories that you can set up. They're a way of classifying your customers. So over here, I just want to point out the area code, the line of business code. These 2 codes are available to everyone. They are used in various reports and groupings and things like that. They are not specifically used for the collection side, but they can be. These are options in there. So, it's nice ways of kind of filtering out the customers that you want to look at and view. But again, they are used by multiple organizations or I'm sorry, multiple business groups. Someone who's doing something that's dealing with sales might have a different need for the area code or the line of business code. And, there might be a cross that way, but they are available for these types of classifications. Your customers can be set up for statements, monthly, weekly, or never. And, that's a nice way of, saying, I want to look at my weekly guys and kind of filter those out as opposed to looking at your monthlies, especially when you're doing your collection calls. Why we would do a collection call, a lot of that is based on the customer terms. So we have your credit limit, what is your credit limit? When we're doing a comparison against the credit limit, it's simply, what is your outstanding balance against that value? What occurs with that is then based on the credit limit level here. Is it hard, soft, or a reference? The hard limit is basically that, I am sticking to my guns. If in this case, this guy goes over $10,000 in outstanding AR on a hard limit, again, there's parameters that kind of dictate things, but typically that says you can go in and you can enter quotes or suspended tickets, but I'm not going to allow it to process forward. That's kind of the typical idea there. A soft limit allows you to flag that, pop a message up that says, hey, you're over your limit, but I am going to go in and give you, I'm going to allow the sale to go through. Maybe, you want to go in and say, I'm only going to take a cash sale or a COD sale. Reference is just that. It's a way for reporting where you can go back and say, this is what I have, and I want to do a comparison, but I'm not going to cut this guy off. Your min and max invoice value is just that. Your payment terms are, what are your payment terms? What, this is a net 10th guy and stuff like that. So what are your expectations, as well as, are you dinging them service charges and stuff like that? The restrict sales at, kind of like this. This allows you to go in and say, when you have outstanding AR beyond this number of days, I'm going to go in and, restrict you back to a cash or a COD type sale. Now, this can work in conjunction with the credit limit. So Rudy here, if he happens to be over his 10,000 in outstanding AR, he's going to go on hold. The credit check is going to launch. Maybe he only has $100 balance, but he hasn't paid that in 45 days. That can flag that as well and say, hey, you know, you're beyond your days outstanding. And what ends up happening when we take a look at that in point of sale, if he's beyond those days, it goes out and it says, hey, you know, I'm only going to allow you cash or COD. You can see up here, his balance is $7,500. So he's under his 10,000, but it is flagging him and saying, you know, you can only do a cash sale. Okay. And let's jump back over here. Putting a customer on stop. Okay. There's a couple different ways of putting someone on stop, and it's basically, you know, you're firing the customer or you're doing something dramatic with this account. We're going to talk about that a little bit more when we actually get into the credit processing, so I'm not going to waste time on that right now. A couple other items that we have relating to the credit processing under the extra details. What we just talked about was putting somebody on stop. We do have an automatic stop process that will go in and evaluate customers and say, you know, hey, you're beyond this, and so now you're going to go on stop. This little flag here says, you know what, hey, this is a great customer. Sometimes his credit balances go crazy. He's buying big equipment, stuff like that, but I don't ever want him to go on stop. So this is just a way of kind of catching that to make sure that we don't go in and do that. So, you know, the automatic stop process, it won't step on that. But it gives me that that flag. All right. And let's jump over to my miscellaneous here for a little bit. We have the status type, which is part of our customer relationship management piece. And there are two different flags. There's a status type that allows me to subjectively set what type of customer this is. So this is very similar to like the line of business or something like that. This can show up in point of sale or sales order entry, where you can go in and have it display on the customer detail screen. It says, hey, this is a big customer. This is a small customer. This is whatever you want to put in there. And you can define, you know, what type of account. You make up this list. We also have something called sales band, which is not subjective. Okay, this one here, you're making a decision of how you want to flag a customer. The sales band allows me to set ranges up that says, this is what this customer sales activity dictate, and this is what I want to call them. Okay. So now let's actually talk about something that we're here for. Over here under the custom fields, probably all know that these custom fields allow you to track additional information inside Autopart. It allows us to use these custom fields in all kinds of reports and inquiries and things like that. They are there for customization with you. A lot of times during the implementation process, we'll take the data that we're converting from an old system to bring into this system, and we'll utilize some of these fields to determine, you know, or track data that you already have and make sure that we have it for use going forward. From the credit control perspective, I have a couple fields that are listed here. One of them, this fifth field here, I have it labeled as credit control. And this is a way of listing different accounts into different categories. Okay. What this allows me to do is say, when I'm doing my collection calls and I'm bringing this information up on the screen, these are the types of accounts that I want to look at. Some uses, some people will go through and say, you know, this person in our collection group is really good with dealing with the small companies. They are dealing with, you know, more of the hand holding, the nice relationship side of the world. And we have other people that are, you know, their skill set drives toward dealing with the large corporate type organizations. Maybe there's, you know, a head office that's paying the bills and things like that, and they deal better with that. You know, that's an example of, you know, why you may wish to classify one customer into one list and another customer into another list. Some people simply go through and say, you know what, I have these are my employees that do collection calls. And so I'm going to say half go here, half go here. You know, there's a whole different ways of doing this. What I'm just trying to say here is this is a way of classifying your customers for your use. And this is only used by credit control. So whereas the line of business and the area code that I was mentioning earlier under the general tab is used by many different groups within the organization, this is for credit control. We have another field over here called that we have a credit analysis type function that basically allows us to go in and send letters and things like that. And we're going to talk about that as we're going through this process. And it keeps track of what's being sent, how many times it's being sent and things like that. So it helps us with that type of analysis that says, you know, who am I constantly sending reminders to and things along those lines. Okay. So the big thing within these types of classifications are, you know, what works with your individual organizations and your individual markets. There are some markets that are just straight battlefield condition. It doesn't really matter who you are, and everything is extremely price competitive, and they will buy from you all day long and be your best friend until the guy across the street does something else, and they'll drive you like a hot potato. There are plenty of other organizations where they are very relationship valued, where, you know, your relationship between you as the vendor and them as the consumer is very tight, and there is much more of the handshakes between you guys, and if there is an issue, they'll work with you and things like that. In reality, there's kind of a mix across the board, but, you know, there are different markets as I've traveled around where you can see there are, you know, things that are very focused one way or another. So these types of classifications allow us to kind of focus in on that a little bit. So one of the typical ways that people do collection calls, and, you know, it's from various systems that I've seen over the past, as well as what people are doing in Autopart right now, is simply using the age of debt report. All right. And to kind of facilitate the use of that, under the accounts receivable parameter screen, under the print options tab, you can see this whole top box here is dealing with what we're going to do on the age of debt report. Do I want to show the contact name, the phone number, payment terms, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go step through all of these, but it allows you to customize the results that come out on the age of debt report for your use, all right? And there are plenty of people that use this. And so again, I'm starting kind of at the beginning processing, and we're going to step into more detail as we're moving forward. But I'm starting with what I see all over the place and how people are doing this. And again, there's different criteria, different check boxes in terms of, you know, what you want to show, not show, et cetera, et cetera. And what that ends up looking like is the screen here. The top section here allows me to go in and do selection criteria. So do I want to run this by customer? Okay, so by customer, it allows me to put in customer ranges if I choose. Sales reps, okay, so I could run it for a sales rep. Do your sales reps help do collection calls? I don't know. By area code, line of business code, what we were just talking about on the customer maintenance screen that allows that classification. Or, you know, if you've got foreign currency accounts and things like that, you know, maybe someone deals with, you know, Canadian customers versus US customers and things like that. And, you know, it's just one of the classifications that you can use. Currency of origin allows me to display, do I want to have it in the customer's currency, the local currency, or do I want to have both of them on there? The statement accounts. Okay, again, I'm just kind of pointing out what we have back from the customer file and how that relates back to the age of debt report. You can see the criteria, do I want zero balances and things like that. The standard format gives me kind of my totalers by account. Detailed format gives me, detail. And the summary just gives me kind of the total aging. What type of accounts am I looking at? Okay. What the terms are. Again, criteria that we just took a look at. I can go in using the transaction date or the due dates. Okay. I'm only looking at open CODs, right? CODs really shouldn't have a balance, right? Anyway, I'm going to just go ahead and hit display here. And what this gives me is the information displayed on this report based on that parameter screen, based on the sortation and things like that I've selected. And it gives me the detail of what they owe period by period by period. All right. This is my standard format. You can see it's 103 pages worth of stuff. This is kind of sorted out there by my accounts here. And it's, it works. I can change this to my detailed format. I'm going to go ahead and hit display again. And now it's giving me all my invoice, service charges, and things like that. It's 136 pages worth of information now. And this gives me all of that particular detail. Okay. So, what does it give you? It gives you the aging. I can have, my contact information and the phone number and stuff displayed over here on the side. So I could do collection calls from this report. What I've seen people do is print this report and they start at the top and they start kind of scanning down and they start making calls and they scribble notes on here, or they use Post-it notes. I love when I see Post-it notes and they're stuck around the side of the monitors, okay? Because those are the reminders to go back and follow up on something. I've seen people that go in and, they jump into their calendar and put reminders in their calendar. So when you're looking at, next Thursday, I have a whole slew of things that I need to take care of. And they're all these little, call this person, call this person, call this person type thing. Right? What this doesn't do is there is no electronic tracking of any of those collection calls. Okay, I'm doing things manually on the side and I'm writing notes someplace. It doesn't give the visibility of collection calls to other people within the department. You might have collection calls and you have that Thursday where you have a whole slew of follow-up activities and you call in sick that day. Well, nobody else has visibility to that. And so no one can pick up your Slack and things like that. It's not keeping track of information about the customer. There's things that obviously you want to protect in the collection side that you want to keep internal to your department. You don't need collection activities to be displayed out on the counter, okay? But when the sales rep comes in and they want to increase the credit limit on a customer, well, this is a customer you're hounding all the time, maybe you don't want to do that. These types of collection activities, if they're stored electronically, you're not going to see. Now, for those of you that are using this report, if anybody's using it, I was at a customer and talking through something similar to this as she was telling me what she does for collections. And I said, well, here, let me show you something else. And I started to show her what we're going to be going through, and she was a very, very, very nice woman until I mentioned that. And then I thought she was coming across the table and was going to strangle me. She was like, don't you dare take my report away. This is what I live in. I'm like, okay, we're done, right? I'm not taking anything away. All I want to do is show you that there's other alternatives to printing out a big old green bar piece of paper and, writing handwritten notes and things like that, that may be of benefit to your organization. I'm not telling you what you should do, shouldn't do. I'm just kind of throwing some options out there for you. So let's see if we can find some things that address some of the limitations that a printed report actually do. So some of the things that we have to set up is back under general codes. And the one thing that we want to do is set up our departments. So we're going to flag something as our credit control department. Again, we want to, the notes that we're entering in against the credit department, we probably want to keep those hidden from general view. Right? So we have different options and things like that that we can set, and this gives you some visibility that other individuals won't have. And in the operator side, we're going to go in and flag some of them in the credit control department, giving them access to the different types of screens that we're going to be going through. All right. There are, obviously, I mentioned that there's parameters. We all know that Autopart has a lot of parameters and a lot of different functions for setting things up. And there's probably a lot of you that are, are familiar with going through general codes, and you're looking at this list saying, hey, I don't have all that stuff on mine. You're right. We don't turn all these on for everybody. But, it is what it is. If you remember, we were talking about the different classifications of the customer and using that credit field on the extra, the custom fields screen. That gives you the ability to classify customers that are only for the credit control department for doing the collections, and they're not shared by anybody else. Whereas here, if we're using the line of business codes or the area codes, these are shared by everyone. When we start stepping through, the customer side itself, we talked a little bit about some of the classifications of the customer. So I mentioned that we have these customer status type that allows you to subjectively set what you want your customer to look like. This is a big customer, small customer, whatever it happens to be, and you can give them a different color and stuff like that. And that can display on the customer details screen in order entry and sales order entry, giving information to the new guy on the counter, right? What type of account is this? Then I also mentioned that we have the sales bands that allows us to set up ranges of sales activity and give them another type of ranking. So this is an automatic setting. Typically, we would set this to run during the month end, and it allows you to go in and see the subjective against the actual, and you can make some determinations that way, such as it's a large organization that you're working with, but they don't buy a whole lot from you. That might be something that a sales rep wants to use, when they're going out making a sales call and stuff like that. So this is part of the customer relationship management component that allows me to go in there and kind of classify those accounts. We have also the credit control call types. Okay, what the credit control call type is, when you're making an outbound call to a customer, you have to have a reason. Okay? Typically, you're not doing it to say, hi, how you doing? What are your plans for the weekend? This allows you to go in and you define these. Again, this is inside general code, so you can define what those happen to be. So I can say, hey, it's an invoice call, it's a collection call, it's whatever you determine is appropriate. So this listing here is the reason for the call. Why am I making this call? Why am I talking to this account at this point? The call codes are the result of the call, right? So these type of things, I just want you to kind of file away that, don't just say Steve's rambling again. You're going in there and you made an outbound collection call. And what was the result? They told you, I'm never paying you. They told you the check's in the mail. They told you, I've got a bunch of credits. I need someone to come pick this stuff up. Things like that. So this gives you the ability to see the why and then the result. All right. And we're going to step through what happens when we do that in just a moment. All right. So hopefully that's, it's just kind of a quick refresher on the accounts and, how things are set up. Let me jump over here for a moment. A question was posed. I don't know if you can see the little pop-up that I have, but it's, does the restrict sales days work with hard soft the same way it does the credit limit does? Yes, but if I have someone who is on a hard stop, the hard stop kind of trumps everything. It's basically firing the account with the items that are saying, is this a, do I allow credits, or I'm sorry, if their days outstanding is beyond the restricted days number, do I still want it to flip into as a COD or a cash sale? Does it still allow that? That's an option that we can kind of flag, you know, if you want it to work that way. So they can be independent, but they can also work, you know, side by side. Okay, so now we're going to kind of get into the guts of what we do inside the collections component. So I have some options set up on my menus. A lot of people don't have these set up at all, but we're going to kind of walk through those as we're going here. So the credit control call maintenance, what this is, allows me to go in and take a look at those accounts that, you know, I wish to call. And again, operator code, that's going to make sure my department is tied back to my credit control department. For those of you who have seen me do things with warehousing and stuff like that, you know, I always use SWY as my operator code. Well, here you can see I'm using SY because I have different criteria associated with those. My list number. This goes back to the custom fields on the customer side that is only used for the credit control department. It allows you to go in and say, what customers do I wish to, you know, filter by? So I don't have, whereas on the age of debt report, I can use the line of business or the area code, things like that to classify what I'm looking for. This is your own code that you can use, right? And all the customers can have the same code if you want to. You know, it's just a way of kind of separating those. And, you know, I used to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I decided to change it to make, to put a word in there to make it a little bit better. The additional criteria here is saying, what kind of accounts do I want to include in my grid? As you all know, there's going to be a grid displaying with data here in just a moment. And there's 3 options associated with this. The first one is say, give me those customers that have a payment that's due and they're still within their terms. Okay. So this could be, you know, for example, I just want to pull up those customers. You know, maybe it's the small guy who, you know, he's a weekly account and he's never getting the paperwork. But if you call him, he's going to cut you a check right then and there. So this could be the little friendly, hey, you know, it's Friday and, you know, here's what you owe me for the week, or it's Monday, here's what you owe me for last week, those type things. But it gives me the ability to say, here are those customers that are within their payment terms that I want to see, as opposed to, okay, these are those customers that are overdue, right? Or I can simply go in and say, give me everybody with total outstanding payment. So that's what I'm going to go click just because. Now, there's buttons across the bottom that allow me to go in and do obviously different filtering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a new list here. And this goes out there, and based on my customers that are flagged under my list monthly and with their total payment sitting there, so I've got my whole big long list. These are those customers, so flagged. What I can do, and one of the nice things about using an electronic version, you know, I mean, basically, what is this? This is the age of debt report on the screen in a grid as opposed to in a report format. So what does this allow? Well, you know, sortation, right? So, you know, I'm sorting my columns low to high, high to low, alphabetized, et cetera, et cetera. When you're using the age of debt report, that comes out in whatever that format happens to be and whatever that sortation that you have selected. So it's possible that your guy with the biggest amount, this guy owes me 10 grand, and his account number and his name, if I'm sorting by these guys, are way down on, page 312 of my report. So if I generate that age of debt report and I'm starting at the top and I'm scanning down and I'm making my phone calls, this guy, I'm not going to hit him today. I'm probably not going to hit him tomorrow. It's going to be some time out. So you're acting again as the bank for this guy for whatever period this happens to be. Now, when you're looking at this, he owes me 10 grand. And I'm looking across at my aging, I'm going, you know what? He owes me what, 140 bucks, 150 bucks, that's old. That 10 grand is all new. That's telling me just at a real quick glance that he pretty much pays this bill. He probably has some dispute with those other things there, but you know what? He's got 10 grand that's current. He just bought some big equipment and stuff like that, whatever it happens to be. Maybe he doesn't need that phone call. If that rolls over from my September, when October comes around, if he hasn't paid that 10 grand, well, he's probably going to get a phone call. But what this allows me to do is say, give me that stuff that's really old and let me sort by that. All right. So here, Rudy owes me 7 grand. Okay. Well, that 7 grand is really old. Right? He's my deadbeat. He's the guy that I want to go chase first. He's the one that I need to set up a payment plan with. He's the one that, are you going to go to collections? Are you going to sell this off or whatever you're going to do? Are you going to cut them off? Are you going to put them on a hard stop? Those type of things. So because this is coming up in a grid, as within AutoPart, for those of you that have been live for a while and those of you that are in the implementation process, you see as I'm clicking on the column headings, it allows me to do that sortation and allow me to kind of say, it's giving me my priority. Who do I want to call? Who do I want to go after? Okay, we're going to drill into this a little bit more as we're going, but what I want to do is just kind of step across the functions across the bottom so you can see, what we've got here. You saw me hit new list and it gave me a little message that says, you have a list already, you're going to create a new one. Okay, yeah, I did that so you can see what it's doing. Add allows me to put in a collection note, and we're going to spend some time going through that, so we're going to come back to that. Search is obviously search. The call list is my to-do list, and we're going to spend time there. Right? So let's rip through the rest of these, and we're going to kind of work backwards. My notes, all right? For those of you that have been around for a while, you know that AutoPart is note happy. We have notes all over the place. We actually have a screen where there's that's labeled notes, and there's a notes button on there, so you can put notes on notes if you want to. If I click this, it drills into the customer notes. Now, again, based on criteria and what we can see and things like that, allows me to step around wherever we're doing. You can see where items came into. Now, again, this is obviously my demo system, so you can see that there's very few operators other than myself that's putting transactions on here. But what this is, showing me is, date, time specific notes that are out there. These notes could be entered in order entry. So a lot of people in order entry on the command buttons on the right side of the screen, a lot of people have customer notes, allowing on the person on the counter to go in and bang a note in there that will then be visible across the organization. Communication is kind of key. So it allows you to drill in there and see what we're going in and looking for. If you have the security to do so, you can remove notes. Okay. Guess what print does? Okay. And if here, okay, you saw me just kind of click the notes and come in here. If I want to go in and enter a brand new note, so this I can come in and say, put a note against this particular transaction, who this is for, if it's branch specific, operator, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can go ahead and put this in, and that will then add that into the notes for this particular account. All right. All right. And again, these are notes that are the customer level that are typically for just general information. All right. The driver ran over, the owner's foot when he was making a delivery, and someone needs to make a phone call, stuff like that. And you can see there's different searches and things like that that you can put in there. So, accidents and stuff like that, you may wish to go in and kind of filter your search results based upon it. All right. So recall, this allows me to go in and based on my customer list here, I'm sorry, my operator, I can go in and start working a list. I went in and you saw me hit new list, which created a brand new list based on new data at that moment. But the recall allows me to go in and say, okay, it's Monday morning, I create a new list, this is who I'm calling, and you're working it. Tuesday you come in, you work, whatever. So rather than refreshing the list all the time, you can just hit recall. And so it's saving those items for where you're at. How that works is, if you're going through and you're working the list, you made calls, you've updated the documents and things like that, and you remove the line item from the screen, okay? You don't want to have that come back up. You don't want to make the next phone call to the same guy and say, oh, I forgot I talked to you 2 days ago about the exact same thing, okay? So again, the notes are really important. The ability to save where you are and kind of filter down on your collections activities helps that way. You notice there's a status column here. The status column allows me to go in and kind of flag the account to say, I made a call, and it's kind of a high level status. We're going to step into the detail of a call transaction in just a moment. But what this allows you to do is go in and say, what's going on with the account? And you would define this with the help of support. So I can say, Rudy's out of town. Okay, so I can't get a hold of anybody. There's no one there who's going to send me a check, stuff like that. But you can go in and define what these kind of status codes are, and it gives you the ability to quickly take a look at where a particular account is from the grid. So, I have nobody sitting there, but that's okay. You get the idea. So it allows you to go in there, and there's a back-end parameter that we set up to give you that kind of detail. Print, on stop is, what the stop happens to be. Okay, so this is I'm firing this customer and I no longer want to deal with them, regardless of what their balance happens to be. So if I come in and I want to take a look at, this guy, all right, so he's got current activity and stuff like that, but maybe he's not worth dealing with. So I want to put him on stop. So this is one of the ways I can manually put an account on stop. And you saw where you can do that inside customer file maintenance. Well, you can do this from the collection screen without having to jump out and go into customer file maintenance when you make the decision that you want to put them on stop. And this has the same type flavors of you're not on stop, you're on a soft stop, so it's more warning. Hard stop is they're kind of locked down. Okay, so typically a soft stop allows you to do, quotes and suspends, and then it's got to go to somebody else to approve it and allow it to go through. A hard stop is you're fired. Okay, I don't really care, where you're at. Typically, what happens if I flag someone with a soft stop, when you go into order entry and you put the account in, you'll get a message that says, only suspends and quotes can be entered for this. You got to enter a password, it's restricted access, those type things. The hard stop, it simply comes up and says, this guy's on hard stop. Okay, sorry, I can't use you. You can also simply say, don't use this account, okay? This account, I don't want you to use, this is not, it's a dead account. So it's another way of just going in and saying, no, you don't have to flag them as an AR type lockdown, but he's saying, I don't use this account anymore. For those that have head office, so if you have a parent account and then multiple child accounts under that, and then you've got multiple ship tos under that, so you can have 3 tiers of accounts set up, you can go in and say, this is the head office account. So this is not who, I use, all right? This is not who I sell to, this is just the guy who pays the bill, right? There are times where, your customers may merge. One customer may buy out another customer, get another location or two and stuff like that, where you then want to go in and you still might have, they could both, be customers of yours, and now you want to start consolidating those over to another account. So you can say, you know what, don't do this, use this account. And when I put in this original account in order entry, then it's going to say, no, this is the guy that, I want you to use. So it's basically saying, don't use this account, use this one instead. So these kind of settings kind of facilitate the use of the account, okay? So let's jump back over here, and I pick on Rudy because he's got a lot of, outstanding items here. Let's make some calls, let's make some money. So now I'm going back to my add option that I said, we're going to come back to in a moment. What this allows me to do is start doing those collection calls. So I'm going to hit add, and it pops open another little customer note screen for me. At the top, I've got his AR that's kind of squished together, but you have the rough details already listed here, so you know what you're looking at. Here, I can see his activities. Okay, now they go way back. So this isn't just he's at 120 days. We're talking years without, making payments on this stuff. If you notice the memo line, okay, so that memo tells me that I have a note against my service charge here, okay, and this can be entered in cash posting, in account inquiry, things like that. But again, this is a transaction-based note. So I can simply click on a line item, hit my memo button here, and put in a memo if I, click appropriately. So this is, nice detail and things like that. There is the inquiry option. So when you select a particular line item, so here I've got an invoice from August 31st. If I click on the inquiry, it takes me into my AR inquiry where I have all that detail. Here's my August 31st transaction, and I can see that filter that he bought, okay? Or what is there? So I mean, all the detail from right inside the collection note screen while you're on the phone with the customer, I can drill down to the parts on that particular transaction that we may be discussing. All right. And even going so far to say if there were payments against this, I can see this. So they bought a big piece of equipment and there were multiple payments. Maybe you gave them dated billing or something like that. You could see how they were working down those particular payments. So the AR account inquiry, extremely powerful, lots of information that can be displayed. I have a lot of stuff jammed on the grid here. Most people have this looking cleaner, but for demonstration purposes, I want to show, possibilities that could be out there. So again, this shows me all of that particular detail, right? And again, all the way down to the particular transaction against the account. And the notes that are listed, similar to what you saw a second ago, if you have the ability to remove notes, that is there. Inquiry we just talked about. The new is where you're going in and you will log a new transaction, a new call against a particular account. So when you hit new, the bottom portion of the screen adjusts. I can still see the invoices, right? So if you think about the age of debt report, in the detail mode, you can see the line items. Here are the invoices, the service charges, credits, blah, 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 debit notes, if you're using those, all of that detail listed there, but you can't drill into it, right? If I want to go in and drill into the detail there, then I've got to jump into AutoPart and step into the account inquiry or wherever you're going to go to get that detail, as opposed to just drilling right here on the screen. But here I can say, who did I contact? So I spoke to Rudy. Okay. Now, why did you call him? So if you remember back on my general codes where I was saying, let's start with the basics. Why am I making the phone call? Right. So this is my the why side of that equation. Right. So making a collection. And what is my action? All right. Well, the check is in the mail. There is no action. Blah blah blah. He's awaiting a credit. So you can go in and you can log the type of activity there. So if I say I've got to call back in 7 days, this CC, this is if you want a carbon copy like the head office. So this is if you're using email and stuff like that, you can go ahead and do that. If you notice, the follow-up date jumped 7 days in advance for me, as well as the time. So you can see here my time on my demo system is 11:52. And it kind of says, you got a hold of him at this time, right? You made a phone call and you actually spoke to him. So maybe this is a good time to get a hold of this guy. This is the right time of the day to, contact them. And then your comments. Well, again, what is my activity? All right. Et cetera, et cetera. You can put in whatever kind of information that you want to. The more detailed you put in there, the next time that you go in to make that phone call, you know what you spoke to them about last. You can go in and, flag a particular account, how you want this to work, how, all kinds of activities, right? What is the detail? What is the little notes that you would write on the side of the age of debt report, or put on your Post-it note and stick to the side of your monitor, or put in your calendar to go in and call them back on this particular date. It allows you to go in there and store that electronically. Now, what does that provide? You go on vacation, you call in sick, you have activity that you're logging that says, hey, on this date, I want to go in and do something. Someone can fill in for you, right? There might be other communication. There's, as you're going in and making all the collection calls and things like that, and you're logging information against this particular account, and then the sales rep goes in and is talking to, the sales manager and says, hey, look at all the sales this guy's making. We need to, let's give him a big discount. Let's give him, whatever. The sales rep's going to do what they're going to do to try and get as much activity going through as possible. But is there a lot of other effort? Is this the activity going on with this particular account might be causing someone in another group a lot of extra work? So you're not going to give them that sweetheart deal. You're not going to give them the
heavy discounts and things like that. This allows you to communicate that information, not to go back and say, hey, what do you think? And you go, you know, I kind of sort of remember that I got to call this guy. And yeah, well, I didn't talk to him last month, but et cetera, et cetera. So it allows you to kind of go in and do those details. The options down here, you know, cancel, just says, do I want to cancel this, but stay on the screen and create a new note? Okay, so it just kind of makes that so that doesn't happen, or quit allows me to jump out. So what I want to do is I'm going to pick a different guy here, and oops, and if I click on the appropriate button, so you can see here, this has got a list. I hit new list by mistake, and I'm getting a little warning that says, hey, you've got something that you're working on. You know, you're going to refresh this and, you know, start a new one. No, I don't want to do that. I meant to hit add instead. So again, this guy has a lot of really old information. He's got no notes. You know, this is just a really, really old account. So now I might come in and say, who did I talk to? Well, I spoke to Izzy. And, you know, he finally materialized. He's coming back in. He wants copies of an invoice or something like that. You know, I'm going to go in and I'm going to phone him back for something, but I want to have a follow-up date. And I'm going to call him later today. So I'm going to call him at, you know, 1 o'clock. And I said, called and you know, something. So go ahead, update. Now I've got a new note logged against this particular account, and you know, he keeps on going. So maybe this would be a good idea for this guy who, you know, you saw his invoices. When I took a look at his detail here, his invoices are all really, really, really old. Okay, someone's been slacking. But maybe now he is talking to me. Now he's ready to go in. He wants to come back. He's been buying stuff from somebody else, and maybe he's got a big balance over there now. So now he wants to come back over and make good here. So maybe I want to come in here and say, okay, he is engaged. Okay. So it gives me that ability to go in there and say, you know what, hey, I call him every month and nothing's ever going to happen. And so he just kind of sits there and that AR builds for years and years and years and years. But now he's finally engaged again. So as I'm scanning down through this, you know, and, you know, we all have those times where I look at that and go, oh, I don't want to call this guy. Well, you know, you get the same runaround, the same whatever. Well, now this little status code of flipping that over to engaged, he might go in there and say, hey, you know, he wants to start making good on this and we'll certainly take his money. And maybe he's going to start buying from us again, and but maybe we're going to make him cash or something like that. Okay. So I just want to kind of filter my screen a little bit more so you can see what the different options are associated with this. And again, I'm trying to make kind of the correlation between this being very similar in concept to the age of debt report by giving me the totals and things like that for a particular account. You know, like this guy here, I can see he's got activity across multiple months and things like that. And oops, if I go to the right screen, again, I have his balances and things like that. And it allows me to drill into the AR inquiry tab. It's all at your fingertips. It's something that the age of debt report does not provide, because that's just a report. This is interactive. This is built into, you know, obviously Autopart, and I have all of my particular transactions associated with that, even to the point of, you know, you're making that collection call, you're saying, hey, you know, I got 305.29 from you. I paid those invoices, and you might say, no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted that to go against the really old stuff, whatever it happens to be. So as you know, during the cash posting side, if you have it turned on, you can unpay, which breaks the link between that payment and those particular invoices. How far back do you want it to go, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all configurable settings, but it allows you to drill into that detail, unpay, reopen those particular invoices, and apply as needed. So it is much more interactive, and as well as the ability to put in notes against that particular account. If you notice here, this particular account is set up for the sales rep to use the sales rep iPad app, where they can go in and put notes against there. So if you think about it, the notes that the sales rep can see, you may wish to go in there and put a note on here to say, hey, he told me he was going to send a check in, and then, you know, you go and you have a standing visit with them every, you know, third Thursday of the month. So maybe you want them to see that note, right? Have the sales rep help with the collections. You know, they're not doing the, you know, the outbound, the hard phone calls, but if they're going to go see somebody, they may do the, hey, you know, you owe us X, and, you know, stuff like that. Or, you know, can you give me the check? I'll bring it back so I don't have to put it in the mail. That stuff, you know, so you don't get the, I put it in the mail, oh, forgot to put a stamp on it, blah, blah, blah. That stuff. It's easier to talk about the negatives than the positives, right? So that allows me again to put notes against a particular account and see what's there. So let me take a look to see if there's any kind of questions or something like that. So there's a question, where is the parameter for the list number and how do you flag the account with this again? So what that is on the customer maintenance screen, we have a little bit of work that we need to do kind of behind the scenes. On the custom fields side, you have a bunch of different fields. You can see I've got a bunch of unallocated ones here. And I happen to be using this particular field for my credit control list. So I probably should have called this, you know, list number or something like that, because that's what's on the screen. I labeled it incorrectly. For consistency, I should go in and change that. But what this allows us to do is flag these. These can be mass loaded if you want everyone to be initially set with the same thing, and then you can go in and kind of filter that down. And again, this field would be used for you, right? Can I make notes show up in the report? The customer notes are stored within the database. I have some reports that I'm going to show you that I put together, so you can see those kind of details. If you're saying, can these notes that I'm entering show up in the age of debt report, it's not really conducive to that. I'll show you a report shortly that I've set up some of those. Can you view the AR inquiry screen within the credit control list? So that's what you're asking is from this particular screen here. Let's just create a new one. These are just my current guys. You know, this is kind of what I want to filter against. So can we add the inquiry button here at the bottom? I'm assuming what that refers to. I'm going to have to double check. I don't believe that is an option on the screen, but there might be a way of changing that filter. I don't believe that that is an option, but I will double check. And can the information you submitted to the credit control be displayed on a report? Yes, and I'm going to show you some reports that I put together for that purpose. And can you select all customers in the credit control regardless of the list value? Not inside that structure. So that structure is set up to go in and filter down who you want to include on that screen. And I don't have an option to go in and cross multiples. Let me see if I can change that to actually put a wildcard in there. Maybe that will work around that limitation. Where do you see the follow-ups? You're reading ahead of my script, okay? So what we've done so far is, thank you. I don't know if you can see the little screen that I've got popped up here, but what that allows me to do, so far what we've kind of covered is how we can set up classifications on the customer record. Using that age of debt report is what people typically use and what people have been using forever. A lot of people are not aware that this customer credit control list is available. Some of the CRM type profiles and stuff like that. And what this is called is the credit control call list maintenance. Okay. So again, this is hopefully to improve some communications and things along those lines. So that next question is, well, where do you see what you just did? So I have this call list button that I jumped over when I was talking about the command buttons at the bottom of the screen. And this is really where it kind of, you know, part of this is, okay, great. So we've taken some information, we've logged it against the particular accounts and stuff like that. Great, wonderful. But what do we do? How do we get rid of the Post-it notes on the side of the monitor? Well, this gives me my to-do list. So a few minutes ago, we put in a note for Izzy, and we said that we were going to call him back at 1 o'clock. Okay, so my next call is today at 1 o'clock for Izzy. And if I double click that, it takes me into my details. It says, hey, you know, did you go in and, you know, I sent you that invoice. What are we going to do now? Are you paying your bill? Blah, 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 blah. So this to-do list is where it allows me to go in there and see what I've done. So these kind of work hand in hand. This allows me to go in and do, you know, that kind of drill criteria and things like that to see what my last reference, again, this particular order is, and get rid of those to-do lists. This also allows me to go in there with the appropriate security and stuff like that, that if you're on vacation and you have follow-ups, you know, these are my follow-ups, right? But maybe you're going to come in there and you're going to go in and say, oh, okay, so well, Steve's gone, you know, and so we're going to go in and we're going to put in a different, you know, someone else is going to follow up for them. They're going to put in my operator code and allow me to bring this, these activities up. So what that shows me is the activities, okay, for that guy. You saw, you know, I just simply double click that and I can see the last interaction that I've had with this particular customer. Now, what that also lends itself to is back here under my credit control call list maintenance that we started with here, I can take a look at my inquiries, okay, and kind of drill into similar type activities. Now, how do I want to go and filter this? So I can do it by account, by branch, by operator, okay? And obviously when I change that, you know, I can go in and change my operator code to who I'm filtering by and stuff like that. If I want to go in and look for Izzy, okay, and I have to type it properly. Okay. So I only want to take a look at his activities. I can see, I want to group it by accounts. I want to group by all my operator codes. I can do date ranges. detailed or summary version, calls, wait, everything, okay, branch, et cetera, and I hit display and it brings up the same type details, okay? Double click it and it brings up the same information. So, the question is, well, gee, which way do I want, this to go? Where would I look for this information? Well, if I bring up a different account, let's bring up my deadbeat, okay? So now I have a lot of information. I've got a lot of calls for this guy, all right? So whereas my call list maintenance, that's my to-do list, right? That's where I go in there and say, here's who I need to call. Here's who I need to kind of, follow up on. Did the check come in? That type of stuff. This inquiry allows me to go in there and see all of my activities, all my postings, all my, detail, and say, okay, what's going on with this guy, And again, I can drill into the detail to see more information and stuff like that. So there's two different uses, all right? This is, excuse me. This allows me to go in and take a look at the notes that are in there and, pay me, okay? You promised me money, you still haven't sent me money, blah, blah, blah. So you can go in there and see, what we're actually going for. And that's just a different tab under my screen here. Whereas where you saw where I clicked the call list, and many people have this as just a menu option, okay? Because as I'm coming in and I'm saying, okay, so what do I have to do today? Oh, there's my to-do list. There's my Outlook calendar, my Google Calendar, whatever it happens to be. However you're tracking those activities where you're going in to make the next phone calls, this is coming up there and saying, here's who I have to call up through, today. If you have something, you went in and, you spoke to this person today and you said, okay, I'm going to call you in 3 days. Well, you can go in there and put in a follow-up in 3 days. Well, you don't need to see it today. It's not on your to-do list today. So this is your to-do list for today. If I go in there and I want to change this to October 1st, okay, so it added one more line item, okay, so that guy. But, it's giving you that ability to have, your follow-up activities. Now, here for my Izzy guy, where I went in there and he wanted a copy of an invoice, right? So, and again, I showed you double click it, drill into the details for that. If I hit new call, this allows me to actually put another item on there. So I spoke to Izzy and, there was a callback and I'm just flagging him for a future date, all that stuff from before. Okay. Whatever, right? But, as you're putting this in, all this detail is now tracked for you, okay? And this is building a chain for me for Izzy. Let's go back and take a look at what I've got now. Oops, this is really where I wanted to go anyway. Okay, So again, it's just a nice interactive way of going in there and having that kind of detail there for you. Okay. Let's see. On the credit control, can you filter the operator call list by date? So for this particular screen here, the only filtering that you really have is, am I dealing with current, someone who's over their terms, or just total outstanding balances? That, as well as the call list, are my only filtering options. So it's not giving me that kind of criteria. Now, because you can go in and, kind of click the column headings to sort, ascending, descending, and stuff like that, it does kind of give you the ability to kind of focus on the periods that you might want to look at, but I don't have a date criteria that I can put onto that particular screen. When entering notes and setting the action for a callback, will the system send us notification for the follow-up? That has been requested. It does not exist at this point. You have to go into that call list, either off the menu, so it can be added as a menu item, or from the call list on the maintenance screen to get to that to-do list, as I keep referring to it. It does not send a message, and the only kind of message that it would kind of route to would actually be through email. I don't know how many people are using the email system. Is it possible to set up a recurring item on a call list? Example, you call a customer every Friday. The kind of items along with that line would be more lending to this call list. So you might have a call list that you choose to say, this is Friday. These are my Friday calls. So your customers would be set with that list number of Friday, for example, and then these would be your Friday phone calls. It's kind of the idea behind what that list is. So it might be, for very large organizations, you might go in and say, this is a Friday 1, a Friday 2, a Friday 3, because there's multiple people that are doing those collection calls. And, you might have a customer that says, I don't ever want to talk to Steve again. I hate that guy. And, so if he calls, I'm not going to pay the bill. Well, take him off, my list and give it to somebody else that they like. It gives you that kind of the ability that way to kind of customize who they're going to be going after. So what I wanted to do is, those are kind of the topics that I wanted to cover for this week, because next week I want to go into that call list. I want to go into more detail in terms of how to build chains of comments, how to go in and use some of the follow-up activities, the collection note process, where we can kind of put a document out there where you can say, hey, you promised me money. Also stepping through the credit letter creation, where you can go in and have standard canned letters and have Autopart provide you a list of accounts that you wish to provide detail to, and step through some more inquiries, and then some of the reports that I've built for these collection activities. So again, what I'm going to do is jump back over here. As the questions that have popped up, I will put together in a document. I will put in screenshots of what I think is relevant based on those questions, and kind of step through that detail. And again, like I said, next week I really want to kind of spend more time in the to-do list portion of this, and where that actually that's where the benefit really happens. So giving you a list of, here are the accounts that you might want to drill into based on this screen, is helpful. Again, you know, I can focus on those customers that owe me money, and I can classify my customers into different areas, again, using that list number. And that's all, you know, fine and good. It gives you the ability of having this on the screen and manipulating the data. You know, so it's working, right? But then when you come in and, you know, the communication internally is where that real benefit happens. When you're using a report, you know, and a lot of people will print the age of debt report, and I mean, that's still a valuable tool. I'm not taking anything away from it, and I'm not trying to take that report away from anybody, because someone will put a hit out on me if I do. But what it allows you to do is go in and, rather than having chicken scratch notes on the side of a report wedged into, you know, the margins, this is the ability to have that on the screen and share, collaborate with coworkers, someone else that might be following up, as well as, you know, some analysis for when the customer wants to have, you know, adjustments made to their account. Okay. Is there a specific format if you choose the phone back? So you're not getting the date to be entered into the follow-up screen. So if you're doing this right here, who did I talk to? Whatever. The date itself, now, you know, because it's going to flip into, you know, that formatted date. But if I put in something as simple as this, right? So I typed in 9/25, 9/25, September 25th, using, you know, American dating, and I tab off of that, it flips over for me to that September 25th, 2020. All right. So if you, and by the way, I don't know if people know this, I see a lot of people struggling with dates throughout AutoPart. When you have a date field, there is a little date conversion parameter that we turn on for everybody. You know, so if you're using, you know, European dating versus US dating, you know, is it month, day, year, or day, month, year, blah, blah, blah. Instead of putting the whole date in there, you saw I just put in 9/25, and it assumes current year, and it flips it to September 25th for me. You know, so it just simplifies putting dates in, and I'm talking about reports. You know, when you go in and you do a load report and there's a date filter on there, you can do what I just did with the dates there. You can go in and, so long as this little date conversion thing is set up, it's going to work pretty much everywhere in the system. And yeah, it's a whole lot easier. Just be careful, you know, when you're at in December and you start doing, you know, 1/10, well, it's going to assume current year. So then you got to do 1/10/21. And we can all say good riddance to 2020. So it looks, it's a additional comment. It won't let me put the date in or time, and I cannot choose an action first. So on your system, there's probably a little bit of setup that we need to do. So as you're doing this behind that, so we'll do that one-on-one and make sure that you're configured for that. So one of the things that you might wish to take a look at on your individual systems to see what is configured or not configured. If we step back into your general codes, some of the things that you're going to be looking for are this credit control call type and credit control codes. Those are the things that exist, you know, the reason and the result, if you will, for those type of calls. This is where you can go in and you can set those up. So those will have to be added to your general codes maintenances. Likewise, Yeah. We're going to want to have some kind of classification for the type of call and this credit analysis. Some people, use this, some people don't. Most people don't. But again, it allows me to keep track of letters that I've generated from the system to that account, and we'll step through that again when we discuss next week. All right. So if you want to see if you have items configured, if you're unsure on your individual systems, if you want to take a look at those couple items under general codes, as well as under the customer file maintenance to see if you have something, maybe it says list number. Again, these are configurable settings, so not everyone's going to have the same thing, and it's not always going to be in the same spot. Again, I happen to call it credit control on my demonstration system, but if you take a look over here to see if you have that configured. So there might be some items that we need to configure for your individual systems for the stuff to turn on, but it is part of AutoPart. It is not any additional anything along those lines. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of wrap for today. Be on the lookout for a subsequent registration. You will be getting another link to join the session next Thursday. Same time, same place. And we'll go through in more detail what to do with these collection calls and what we do with those notes and where we can see them and how it can kind of hopefully improve communication as well as follow-up activities. It's kind of simple.
To go in and misplace a note, or forget to call somebody back, and you don't want to be the bank for too long on these outstanding accounts receivable balances. Okay, and I will take the questions that have come in and put together a document for you, as I've done with the other sessions, and send that out to everybody. So thank you for joining today, and we'll pick it up and take it the next steps next week. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you.